Welcome to Habits of Optimal Health. I'm Katherine Eyring, your health and empowerment coach. And tonight I have Dan Norris from Good Nature Organic Lawn Care. But first, anyone who's ever worked with me knows I believe in clearing the toxins from your environment as well as your food. And that is why I am so happy to introduce Dan Norris, certified turf grass professional this evening. He works with Good Nature Organic Lawn Care. He's going to help us be healthier by teaching us about the differences of conventional lawn care and organic lawn care, potential dangers and toxins that we can learn about, what it might do to our bodies, our children, our pets, our water, and more. Then after the interview, you are welcome to ask Dan your questions. So please write down any questions you might have during the interview portion. So welcome, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me this evening.
So how should we start? Let's say I'm a potential customer and I'm saying, Dan, I just don't know. What should I get organic lawn care? What's the difference?
Mhm. Right. Well, of course you should get organic lawn care. That's the first thing that I always tell people. um, but yeah, I guess a lot of so people come to us for a variety of reasons as to why they want to go organic. Some people, it's strictly, I've got a dog and I don't want him or her exposed to the chemicals, which is a great reason. Other people are, hey, my child is immune, compromised or something. And, other people are, I feed the birds and I know what the chemical fertilizers do to our environment. So um, some people contact us and just say, hey, I saw your Google reviews. I want a good lawn care company. So, but bottom line is, I guess there's a myriad of ways or reasons, I should say, why somebody should go organic, for their lawn care, for their own health, for their children's health, for their pets' health, for the environment, and then of course one of our big arguments is for the lawn itself. So yes, the chemicals do produce a quote unquote nice looking lawn, probably weed free or more weed free potentially, and maybe more green, not green in one sense of the word, but just maybe the chemicals are high nitrogen and they create a green lawn quickly, but then that also starts to fade and then you need another shot of chemical to keep it up. So but our argument, I guess, is in the long run that the lawn itself can be better and healthier than if they were using the traditional chemicals. It may not happen as quickly, but it can happen, and it hopefully will happen down at some point in the future. And as long as they're invested in that, in that process and our patient, I think they'll be rewarded in the end.
Years ago, we just completely accepted clover as being a natural part of the lawns, and clover actually really builds the health of our soil. Can you talk about
Yeah,
that?
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, right. Years ago, clover was sold as in most grass seed mixes, clover was a part of that. The clover is in the legume family, so it's meaning that it's nitrogen fixing. It actually does, pull nitrogen out of the atmosphere and fixes it in the soil. It helps to discourage other weeds in the lawn. So it was highly thought of and highly prized, and people did accept that. With the advent of the typical chemical weed killers, like for dandelions and things like that, those chemicals started to kill the clover as well. So clover did kind of fall out of favor. The look of the white flowers on the lawn then became not so favorable or not in people's eyes, at least. So then clover was not looked on as beneficial, but it's a weed and I have to get rid of it. So so yeah, it's kind of unfortunate in a way, but we have been, I think, conditioned over the years to look at a lawn and see nothing but grass, and then that's what we want, and that's what we want to see. And we I think our customers are probably a little more forgiving, if you will, and we'll live with some weeds rather than having a 100% weed free lawn. But there is a a clover product out there that we actually have on our website and some other people sell as well, but it's called micro clover. And it is a clover, but it doesn't flower as much as your traditional or typical Dutch white clover. So it's kind of a nice balance in that you can add this into your lawn. It does provide the nitrogen, but it doesn't really show up as white flowers. And therefore people aren't as opposed to putting it in their lawns because it doesn't have the appearance of that white clover that, again, in people's minds now, when they see a white clover flower, they're, they got to get rid of it. So the
Well,
other,
you
yeah.
use the word conditioned, that we've been conditioned, and that is the truth. We are conditioned to think that a lawn is beautiful if it's this pristine, just grass. And that's just a mindset. That's a thought because
Mhm.
you can change that mindset as I did so many years ago. And I look at a lawn that is that just grass and nothing else. And I
Mhm.
think, ooh, toxic. There's
Right,
toxic. I don't want to
right.
walk on it barefoot. I don't want my animals on that. Like, I don't want to live in an environment that is so um, cared for in that way that bees cannot exist, that our pollinators are not supported, you know?
Right. No, it's a great point. I mean, that was, I think, one of the missions early on of Good Nature, which, and I don't know if we've ever necessarily achieved this. I don't, but that was one of the missions, was to change people's mindset of what a, good, quote unquote, good lawn is. So, um, I guess part of the irony of it, when we first started out, we really did, I think, capture those people who were not wanting to use the chemicals and hardcore environmentalists and things like that. Um, but as our business has grown, we are reaching into people who, yeah, they like the organic idea, but they really don't want weeds and they want that, kind of look like you're talking about. So again, I don't know if we have achieved a people to change their minds, because it is kind of hard to change that mindset when they are bombarded with TV advertisements or whatever, radio advertisements. You've got to, weeds are bad and you got to kill them, and insects are in your yard and you got to kill them, and all that kind of stuff. Um, so again, we hopefully we can, or we are changing people's minds, but at the same time, I think we are getting closer to achieving, a lawn like you were describing without using any chemicals. And even though that maybe, you know, goes against kind of the original organic idea of, hey, let's have a few, let's have some weeds, or let's have a lot of weeds. Maybe we hopefully are bridging that gap, and at least some people are coming around to the fact that they can have a good lawn. It probably has some weeds, but it's closer to the lawn that they used to have when they were using the chemicals,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. So we live in a community here where I am, Avon Lake, right by the water. And
Hmm.
I'm always concerned that everything flows to the water, everything flows downhill. Um,
Right.
how does how do these products affect our water?
So the chemical fertilizers, just by their very nature, they are water soluble. So, a portion, according to the US EPA, 80% of the nitrogen and phosphorus, chemical, fertilizers runs, either leaches into the water or runs off. So yeah, definitely being right on the shores of Lake Erie, that's very, important to us. But I mean, basically anywhere you live, you've got some sort of water source nearby, whether it's a creek or stream or whatever. And I'm sure, or I'm sure a lot of people know of or have heard about the algal blooms that happen in Lake Erie, and that is due to runoff. Now, some of that is from farms, certainly. The farmers, and not to blame the farmers, but I mean, they are contributing to that when they use the chemical fertilizers. That's a major source of the runoff. But in looking at, and I forget the statistic, but in looking at the actual acreage of how many acres we have in farms and how many acres we have in lawns, I think the lawns actually exceed the acreage. I think it's 32 million acres of lawns in the United States, versus X amount of farmland, which is actually less. So yeah, so that's a major problem. A number of years back, I don't know if people remember, but the city of Toledo was without water. for about 4 days because of the toxic algae blooms that happened in Lake Erie.
Yes.
And I was talking to a prospective client after that had occurred. It was during the summertime, and it was probably the next year when we were talking about it. And she was not from Toledo, but she was in Toledo at the time. They were there for a wedding, and she said, we were talking about it, and she said, "Oh my gosh, that was horrible. We were there. It was, they had no water," and we talked all about that. And so we talked a little further about it, and she had no idea why that there was no water. She had no idea what the algae blooms were caused by. And so, even though that was a pretty, widely publicized event where, literally thousands and thousands of people were without water because of chemical fertilizer runoff, causing these algae blooms and then making the water toxic to the point where the city of Toledo could not treat it for people to be, drinking it. So, but again, obviously this was just one person, but she had no idea that it was what it was caused by, So a lot of times people don't put that connection together. And also, again, people who don't live necessarily near a large body of water don't put that together, the put it together that, okay, even if I'm not next to Lake Erie, I'm next to some, water source, and that eventually runs into Lake Erie. If you're in Northeast Ohio, at some point, everything runs into the Ohio River, in Ohio. So, and, everything runs into a major water, source at some point.
Mhm. I remember Alec telling me that there's plenty of research about what happens with our pets also that are
Mhm.
connected with the chemicals on the lawn to the amount of cancer in dogs and cats.
Yeah, that's actually, yeah, it's absolutely true. There is research out there. Certain breeds are more prone to, to certain, right, cancers and things like that. But I mean, I've talked to veterinary clinics over the years and vets that see dogs that come in that have, they've got the, the chemical fertilizer granules embedded in their paws, and they're salt based, and they're burning their paws, they're causing irritation and things like that. So, you know, something as little as that, where just that in and of itself is a, a cause for concern. I would say, why are we putting these down, these chemicals down, fertilizer? But yeah, there's definitely been a lot of research, yeah, about that,
Mhm.
or some research, I should say. Yeah.
I think also when you picture a farm and you're looking out at vast acreage, you're not expecting that to be pure grass. You're expecting wildflowers and variety of all kinds of different growth. So, once again, going back to the conditioning from marketing that
Mhm.
has given us this impression that what's beautiful is this perfection of pure grass, nothing else. I mean, it would just be so strange to look at it if you were looking at a farm that way.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a monoculture that's been created by our perception of what is again, a quote unquote, a good lawn. So, and monocultures really don't exist in nature because they're not sustainable. And I mean, our agriculture, on the side note, has gone that direction too, to where it's monoculture, and to where, the farmers can put in, chemical fertilizer, and they don't have to do anything to enhance the soil, because if there's a lack of nitrogen every year, they can just put more chemicals in. So, and that's a major problem too.
And I know I've used the word monoculture before, and then people have asked me, what is that word? So I'd like
Mhm.
to explain. That is when you're growing one crop. And this is what they do with wheat, soy, corn as an example. These are these are the crops that the government is helping the farmers grow, and it's part of the destruction of our soil as well. So, interesting thing, the clover actually builds the soil. We talk about regenerative farming and all these things. Clover is actually really good for our soil. And dandelions, if I remember correctly, have deep roots that actually help break up the clay and things like that. They actually have a purpose as well.
They do, yeah. In fact, I read some stories or a story years ago about a farmer who his whole methodology is he plants dandelions on purpose in his fields, and because of the deep root systems, those dandelion roots actually will pull up nutrients out of the soil and they'll pull them up and bring them up more towards the surface. And then what he does is he eradicates the dandelions after they've done their work of pulling up the soils and making it, or pulling up the nutrients and making the soil more nutritious. He eradicates the dandelions, not with chemicals, of course, because he was a completely organic farmer, but physically or an organic method, and then plants his crops, and he has a much better soil base to work from, and he lets the dandelions do that work of providing the nutrients rather than having to put in inputs. So yeah, so there's a lot of cool things in agriculture, and there's connections between what we're doing on the lawns and agriculture as well.
I think sometimes not everybody is even thinking about these things because often we have a lawn service. We have somebody who's coming and mowing our grass and taking care of it for us. So just this afternoon, I was using my riding mower and the chute was blocked up. And because the grass is thick, heavy at this time of year,
Hmm.
I shut it down. I had to reach into the chute and get the grass out. And I thought, this grass, it just feels so good. It's so beautiful. It's so healthy. And it has no chemicals on it. And I'm so grateful because I
Right.
would be putting my hand into the chemicals otherwise.
Right. No, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's great when you can go out on your lawn and you or your pet or whatever, and you don't have to worry about the chemicals. And one going back to the pets, and I just thought of this because I do walk my dog at night, and oftentimes we come across a sidewalk that's covered with the fertilizer pellets. And if now if it's a homeowner that's done that, there's not a lot you can do. But if you do, I always tell people, if you're walking down the sidewalk and you do see those fertilizer pellets and you see a sign in the lawn, it usually has the company's name and phone number on there. And I've done this numerous times. If that's the case, I will call the company and say, hey, I'm at such and such address. You guys were here and did an application. You need to come back and blow that off. And it is a law. They have to remove any fertilizer from impervious surfaces like driveways, sidewalks, and things like that. Whether or not they do it, I've seen it happen where they do it. They do come back and they do clean it up. So at least in that way, you're not walking through it, your dog's not walking through it. And then also the next rainfall that happens, that fertilizer isn't moving across the sidewalk and right into the storm drain, storm sewer. At least it's still chemical, it's still there, it's still chemical fertilizer, but it is at least, on the grass and less likely to run off into, the storm sewer, which then leads directly to a creek or stream and then ultimately to Lake Erie in the north here.
So here's another thought too. So soccer fields, as an
Hmm.
example. Here's our children, our grandchildren playing on
Hmm.
soccer. And um, if those are so sprayed with chemicals, our kids are rolling in that stuff.
Hmm.
Have you seen more schools now get involved with less chemicals, organic care? Where are they going with
Yeah,
that?
that's a great question. It's kind of I'd say kind of a mixed bag, but we have worked with, and we do currently work with, like Shaker Heights and the city of Twinsburg and some other places on their ball fields. We have been treating most of the major parks, including there's a couple baseball fields and soccer fields in the city of Lakewood. So they had made a commitment to go organic a number of years back, and we've worked with them on their fields. And um, again, I say it's sort of a mixed bag because it's hard to say exactly where it's at, but we do know there has been levels of awareness raised, certainly in relationship to children. And because with kids' immune systems completely different than an adult's immune system, a one-time exposure to these chemicals can cause lasting damage, where an adult male, and that's another thing that just dawned on me too, was that when chemical companies have to test their chemicals before they're approved by the EPA. The standard is a 150-pound male, which great, okay, but not everybody's a 150-pound male. What about the 40-pound 7-year-old or the 80-pound or whatever it is, the kid? So,
And
or
what about pregnant women?
well, pregnant women, right? There's a whole myriad of other people that are not falling into that category. So that standard really doesn't hold up,
Right.
obviously.
Well,
So
I
yeah,
want to
so
say, and then I'm thinking about older adults too, who might be just a little bit more fragile in that way too. Usually they will say the very young and the older people as well have
right,
more
right,
sensitivities.
exactly. Yeah. So it's I think it's been a bit of a struggle. We did work with some golf courses for a while. We did some testing on golf courses as well, because they do put a ton of chemicals on the golf courses, and the people obviously that are out there working on the courses and playing on the courses are being exposed as well. So um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I've recently told people I think yes, it looks beautiful, a golf course, because again, it's this look it's artificial. But
Hmm.
I wouldn't want to live on one just because I'm too aware of all the chemicals that
Hmm.
are used.
Right,
And
right.
I just don't want to be exposed to that 24/7.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. We've talked to some golf course superintendents that said the standard that we're trying to uphold is very tough, because people watch golf on TV and they see these courses like Augusta down in Georgia. They just had the Masters tournament. That course is not even open to the public. I mean, it's maintained so pristine and so manicured, but people see that and then they go to their local course and expect to see the same thing. And now, granted, if you go to some of the public courses, there probably people are a little more forgiving, but some of the higher end country clubs and stuff like that, you know, they're they're trying to maintain something that is very difficult to maintain with,
Which is ironic. They're paying a higher amount of money for more toxins. And
right,
it is
exactly.
kind
They
of,
are. Yeah,
yeah.
you're right. Yep. Yeah.
Um, So I always remember that when I was a kid too, I stepped on bees. We all stepped on bees. We
Hmm.
all had bee stings when we were kids because of the clover and the dandelions, and it was just part of being a kid,
Right.
stepping on bees all the time. Now I still do because I have an organic yard and pretty much do step on a bee every year, but I don't think I even hear about kids stepping on bees anymore. It's not very often. It's just not
Right. Yeah,
the
that
norm.
is true. Yeah. Yeah. And that goes back to the micro clover too that I mentioned earlier, that micro clover that doesn't bloom very much. And that is one, I mean, that's a good thing, I guess, in that people are very concerned about their kids and bees and getting stung. So that's probably the number one reason why people are concerned about the clover with the Dutch white clover with the flower, because oh my gosh, there's going to be bees, and then you know we got to get. But what would you rather have I'm not encouraging people to get stung, but okay, you get stung once or twice maybe, or you have a steady dose of chemical toxins on your lawn. What's worse? So yeah.
So, what could somebody do? Let's say very often it's a decision that's made by the neighborhood, maybe especially if you
Mhm.
have an HOA and that kind of
Mhm.
thing. And
Right.
so I suppose someone could bring it up to their HOA. Could they have someone like you, come out and speak to them and talk about alternative ways of dealing with their lawn?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we have actually worked with a number of HOAs, and we do have a few HOA, HOA associations, townhomes, whatever they are, that have gone organic, and it is kind of driven by, or has been driven by, the residents. They've made people aware, and so I think in that regard, kind of going back to you were asking about the schools and stuff like that and the ball fields, um, some progress has been made there. I think same thing with the HOAs. We have in years past, it was, this is too expensive. We can't do it organically, but I think people are becoming a little more enlightened. And I know there's a development in Rocky River that signed up this year, an HOA, and we have a couple down in the Columbus area. We have some on the east side of Cleveland. So it seems like people are becoming more and more aware of that. And yeah, A, we would definitely go talk to them about it. And then B, if they can, find it in their budget, if you will, then we can work with them on that to make it fit into their budget, hopefully. So
So that being said, is it more expensive organically
it
compared
it
to conventional?
it is, yeah, that's a good question. And I'm sure anybody who's bought organic food is probably well aware that it's going to be more expensive. The products we use are, bottom line more expensive than the chemicals. Now, granted, we feel like in the long run, the chemicals don't necessarily solve any issues and can cause other issues. So the initial, low cost of the chemicals sounds good, but over time, as the lawn becomes less, healthy on its own and rather reliant on the chemicals, then you end up having to spend more on chemicals in the long run. Is kind of the way we look at it. So, and it's hard to put a price on your health. And I did talk to some client the other day, and he said, "Well, I'd rather pay a little more for my lawn care, and then I don't have to worry about my dog getting sick and having big, vet bills." So I'm like, "Well, that's a good point." So yeah,
Yeah, Dan, I always say we pay for our health care one way or another. We're either going to go one way to
right,
stay away from the
right,
doctors, or we're going
right,
to go the other way and just be,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, and it does remind me of another story that I had heard a few years ago, or actually read an article in the Columbus Dispatch, and they talked about in the springtime with the spring rains and the runoff from again from farms, but from lawns as well, because of the chemicals that are being put down, and running off into the water system. And I don't have the article in front of me or anything, but it was a few years back. It was the city of Columbus they were spending $10,000 a day extra than what they normally do to treat the water to ensure that those chemicals were not, in the drinking water. So yeah, are the chemicals cheaper? Sure they are, but we're paying for it in another way, either through our health or through taxes or whatever. But yeah, they were spending thousands of dollars a day just to make sure that that water was drinkable for people because of all the chemical fertilizers that were being applied and then running off into the water. So
And I think this will be a good place to stop. Thank you so much, Dan, from Good Nature Organic Lawn Care. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing your expertise, your wonderful information. And we will all continue to spread the good word. Let's all see if we can't turn this world around and make it a healthier place. Thank you.